We have finished all of the applique for the blocks. If you aren't doing applique, then you will be joining us now for the block assembly or the car mat assembly. This is the main assembly for the main car mat. So what we will do is we should have all of our blocks cut out with a lining fabric. So I have a lot of my linings are white. Some of them are the same fabric as the main fabric itself, but you should have a lining cut out. What you're going to do is you're going to remove any loose pieces or parts or whatever, or pin them down. And then you're going to lay the lining on top so the right sides are together. And we're going to pin or clip around the outside of the block. This is going to be the same for any block. We're going to repeat this a bunch of times. Okay, so once you've clipped everything together, we are going, clipped or pinned, we are going to stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside edges. You're not going to leave any gaps for turning. Later on, we will be creating a hole in the lining, and so you don't have to worry about that right now. So we're gonna stitch all the way around at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's go over to my machine and I'll show you. So this is the main block assembly. We wanna make sure we have a good thread color, good neutral thread color in our machine at this point. So I'm just putting some white thread in. Now we're gonna be stitching at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside. Make sure you backstitch on either side. And if you come to corners, you can pivot your needle. And I'm coming back to where I started, so I'm going to backstitch again. And then I'm done. Okay, once we have stitched around at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, what we need to do is clip corners to reduce any bulk. We could also use pinking shears to trim the seam allowance down, or we can also clip into the curves in the corners. Either way, we just want to make it so that when it turns, it's nice and crisp. So just be careful not to cut into your actual seam allowance. I really like to use tiny scissors when I'm clipping so that I know I'm not gonna mess anything up. On this particular block, there aren't a ton of corners. I do have a corner up here. So I'm just going to clip that off. I have a corner up here I'm going to clip off. Okay, and then especially in these like little areas, we want to snip in as best as possible without cutting through this line of stitching we've just done. It's a very narrow seam allowance to begin with, so you might not have a ton to work with. Once you feel like you have sufficiently clipped around, we'll move on to the next part. Next, we're going to carefully pull the block, so this is what I have over here, and the lining apart. Then we're going to clip a hole approximately in the center of the block, about 2 to 3 inches in length. It's not too big, but just big enough. Then we're going to turn the block through that hole we just made. can take a chopstick or we can just poke it with our fingers to make sure that we get all of the points pushed out and accurate. And once you've done that, we can press this block, press everything down so it's nice and crisp. That's what we want. We want nice and crisp blocks. Once we're satisfied with the crispness, we are done. And we can set that aside for now and move on to the 12 other blocks that we need to do that to. So we're gonna repeat that process by doing that to all 12 blocks.